Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending upon when you're watching this. We've got another action-packed episode for you today. We have a lot to go through in a short period of time. We'll start off with some teaser. So, Perplexity has seen some large growth, 780 million queries just alone in May.
Anthropic is out with their new models focused on national security. We'll talk more about that.
Speaking of launches, Mistral launches an AI coding assistant.
No surprise there. And Meta's oversight board overturned a case involving deepfake ads.
And 11 Labs, speaking of launches, launched a new impressive audio model called 11v3. We'll go through that and more because we have some new segments, prompt of the week and some AI use cases.
Stay tuned, everybody, for a quick introduction. We'll be back.
Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. You're looking to stay up to date on the AI. This is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jaime Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. Welcome back, everybody. Like we said before, got another action-packed episode for you today. We'll start off with the quote of the week as well. So this one comes from Microsoft's Chief Product Officer of Experiences and Devices, which, by the way, that's a pretty cool title. Her name is Parna, and I know I'm probably going to mess up her last name, Chanapradagata.
Not bad. Channa Pagoda.
I knew I was going to be off on that one. But basically, she talked about how the world is transforming as it relates to AI and productivity and how companies are actually working with and impacting that. So she was actually on Bloomberg Tech Summit this past week with Ed Ludlow and Caroline Hyde and talked through a couple things. But the quote that she had, and this will be directly from the interview, they are not thinking of AI as a snack. It's a main meal, right? For their employees. It's an organization-wide adoption. It's not this thing off to the side. So what does that really mean? And the context of that, again, she was talking about companies and how they're looking at artificial intelligence these days. And it's all about how companies are looking and thinking about it. It's this main distinction between what is casual versus serious AI adoption. So the leading companies are not just experimenting with AI anymore. I would say, yeah, that was probably true 2 years ago, especially when the first GPT models, at least with ChatGPT was released. Call that more or less the let's kick the tires on this. In her words, a snack. Just something that I do in the interim, right? But they're not doing that anymore. At least the large companies, those that are serious, are actually treating this as the quote unquote main meal, where it's core to the organization in the sense that they've committed from a central standpoint, whether it's the higher ups or everybody within an org, that this is going to be mission critical. This is going to be aligned with their operational aspects and processes. So it's all woven in. And a lot of this is driven based upon the fact that it's about the efficiencies, or in her words, the efficiency to effectiveness, using these tools as they're evolving. It's value that's driven in terms of like summarizing meetings, doing automated note taking. So there's a shift going from just using these tools casually to where they're driving some impact. Whether, again, this is again in her words, deriving superpowers for those end users, driving productivity. Again, that could be deep reasoning. It could be uncovering various different deep and or complex insights out of the data. What's also key for one of the things she mentions is integration. So, it's supposed to, I look at it this way. How do you drive productivity? It shouldn't be something that is not in tune or not aligned with your core activities of the day. So this is about bringing AI to where you work, making it meaningful and deeply integrated into the daily lives of us, quote unquote, as employees, rather than it being some separate destination. And that's the clear distinction here. And this is what she's really looking and or getting at as it relates to larger organizations, really taking this as, quote unquote, the meal and not a snack.
I totally agree. I think, I was thinking about this, Jamie, that you and I are privileged to actually use these AI on a daily basis in every single thing, from mail to meetings to generating the content and giving the answer. Nowadays, actually, I use it a lot, Copilot, in terms of the answering the questions to the customer. Like from training, every single thing. It does really feel like a main meal and not a snack here and there that you just consume.
Yep.
Totally change the experience.
Yeah, very, very true. I definitely agree. I mean, I don't think there's a day. I don't even measure things now on a daily basis. I measure them almost on an hourly basis on, did I use this tool or that tool? There's always some way that I'm using some level of artificial intelligence throughout the day. So it's definitely become the main meal for me.
Which we are eating 24 hours.
Yeah.
No wonder. Now I blame that to, in terms of why I'm gaining some pounds.
So let's go into our next story, and that's really around Perplexity. So Perplexity has actually their CEO Aravind Srinivas came out this past week and had mentioned that they had hit 780 million queries in May, and that represents actually a 20% month over month growth in the use of Perplexity. And again, Arvind had mentioned that within a year, he sees the use of Perplexity in terms of its search capabilities hitting 1 billion queries a week. Now, think about what I just said. They're not even at a billion right now in a month, and he predicts that within a year they're going to more than quadruple that for getting towards just a monthly rate. So roughly about 4 billion in a month. So hitting that in a week. And if you take a step back, yeah, that's obviously large amount of growth and the way that people are actually using their tools. But if you dig a little bit deeper and try to understand maybe where he's thinking that growth will actually come from, it's got to be not just what I'm going to call organic growth, but growth that is related to something else, and that something else is Comet. So I'm not sure how many people are aware of even what Comet is. This was something that was announced not just last week, to be honest with you, but it was announced back in February, I think. So Comet, what is it? It's actually a new browser. It's based upon the existing browser capability as it relates to Chrome. It's based upon that same Chromium based browser. But what it actually does, or what it's intended to do, is shift the way people use browsers to a AI based experience. So the way that the CEO of Perplexity described it as a cognitive operating system rather than just a browser. So peel that back. What does it mean? Yeah, that sounds like a great marketing piece, but it really is to focus on the way that people interact with a browser, doing the things that you typically might do yourself, right? But it's about how is AI being woven into the things that you might be doing. So the core of this is really the agentic search capabilities within Comet. This is going to be features that enable autonomous task execution. Little things like opening and closing browsing tabs, grouping them, performing actions like checking emails, or even providing summaries of various different pages that you might be pulling up. So agentic search and automation directly included within that browser. There's other things like context awareness, being able to obviously integrating Perplexity's AI into the sidebar and address bar, so allowing queries across tabs and even into Google, various different Google services. So that's another thing. The intent here is that this browser will be able to, I kind of alluded to before, like reading email. This could be either headless or headful, meaning you could have all of this automated. It'll go in, read your emails, and actually reply to it. Again, based upon that contextual awareness and integration. The other thing that the Comet browser, it's supposed to have better privacy and ad blocking. So native within the tool rather than, I'm going to call it like an extension that either Chrome or Edge use today. And since it is Chromium, since I mentioned extensions, since it is Chromium based, Comet will support various different extensions, bookmark and password tools. So again, it's going to be a familiar interface or a familiar feel based upon that it is founded or foundational within the Chromium based world. So anyway, when we go back to the comments that were made by Perplexity CEO, how are they going to get to 1 billion queries a week? Well, they're basing it on the fact that when Comet really hits GA, which by the way, it's still in beta, when it hits GA, that's going to change the way that people are using their browsers and thus interacting with AI-based searching and tooling. And Perplexity wants to be in that space to be able to do it.
Yeah, I marvel at the effort that Arvind Srinivas and Perplexity team is actually putting in to become, they want to control the distribution because they well realize that they're fighting against Google primarily, and Google just controls so much of the distribution, right? In fact, there was recently a congressional hearing on the Google's search monopoly, and then Arvind Srinivas, Perplexity team also actually testified. And they say that, yes, they find it really difficult to actually compete. They were trying to become a default option on some devices, even though that manufacturer wanted, but they had a contract with Google, which doesn't allow anything else to become the default on that device. So I think they have. On the other hand, I believe it was perplexing that I think Perplexity also said that Chrome is best run by Google. I think they had a famous testimony a few weeks ago that, we support Google continuing actually Chrome. They're trying their hard. They were also actually one of the bidder for TikTok. They need distribution because their entire survival depends on, the having to control the distribution, and Comet browser is definitely one way to go. So looking forward to it. I think it would be, refreshing experience.
Yep. Just one last thing. As I mentioned, it's in beta, but the Comet browser is supposed to be launched, just in the next several weeks. So be on the lookout for it. Maybe it'll hit before the July 4th holiday. So in a couple weeks from now.
Comet is coming. Watch out. Yes. Okay. Another big giant, Meta. Meta faces backlash over the deepfake ads. And in this particular case, there was actually a case where there was an ad from Brazil, and this ad is actually for a gambling app. What happened was that they actually took a Brazilian soccer star, Ronaldo, not basically not Cristiano Ronaldo, Ronaldo Nazario, and they created a deepfake ad for him promoting that gambling app, and that ad goes about saying that, okay, how the other jobs like teacher and postman, etc., they earn low, but they can actually earn much more using this gambling app. And so there was some, and all those, most of those were actually generated again with AI using the deepfake. And in this case, this soccer star also did not provide the consent to actually become the the deepfake superstar in the ad. So there was some actually case that was filed by a user, and since there was an ad running over this, they did not take it down initially, and then they took the ad off, but they left the content on the platform, right? So overall, there wasn't actually, I would say, like suitable response to this deepfake ad. So this case was then actually taken up by the oversight board. Now, let me give you some understanding about the oversight board. Oversight board is something that Meta established. It is also often referred as a Supreme Court of Facebook or Facebook Supreme Court. And this was established in 2018 by Musk. And then what he did is he actually collected a bunch of experts in the legal, some professors, some, like even the federal judge and somebody like that. And then they constituted this board, have about, I think, 20 people. What they do is this board takes up thing which people believe that Meta has not addressed adequately. And then this, the idea is not that it will take up every cases that Meta is not addressing, but rather the cases which can actually set the precedent, right? In terms of like the policy direction, etc. It can become the landmark case, as they call it in the legal industry. And that would become then, and the case is actually the outcome of the case, particular case is binding. The recommendation overall is non-binding, but it carries a lot of weight on Meta's policy direction. And there have been actually tussle. The good thing is that it is appreciated for its transparency. It is appreciated for its independence. There has been actually tussle between Meta and oversight board. Like, for example, when Meta actually discarded its team on the content review, there was actually a strong recommendation from this oversight board that this may not be actually a best decision, things like that. So anyway, coming back, so basically oversight board overturned this decision. They say that Meta was wrong to leave this deepfake ad and leave this deepfake content on the platform. So now they have to actually take it down immediately, of course. But I actually admire, I think at least there is some mechanism in place, because oftentimes I feel that some of these platforms, there is no respite. Like I've reported several times on several different platforms, and many times I've not seen action. To be honest, in my experience, only Twitter used to have the actions 2 years ago, when I used to see that. Facebook never took the action. So I think oversight board was a good step.
Yeah, there's. I think we could have just a whole episode just talking about deepfakes. Yeah, the tools are getting. I don't want to say getting. I mean, they're at a stage right now where it's almost very hard to discern what's real or not. I was playing with some video tools just a couple of days ago, and I showed my wife, and she was like, "This is scary," just because how good things are. And it goes back to your comments. These outlets, whether it's Meta, whether it's X or whatever platform you're using or working with, they need to have some policies. And it comes back to, and I forget the acronym, but there was um, some standards that were put out a couple of years ago. It was a consortium between like Microsoft and a few, I think Adobe might have been in there, about ways to identify content that was not created or that's created by AI. The problem is not a lot of organizations are actually leveraging that quote unquote standards to identify things, and that's the point. It's this oversight board, looking what's scam content or not. You can have all the different standards in the world to help identify things, but if these companies are not actually adopting them and using them, then who's the where does the finger get pointed to in terms of the blame? I yeah, you probably should point it back to the people that are making these deep fakes without consent, obviously, but it's also these outlets, again, Facebook, Meta. If they're not employing things, then the blame is on them as well. So it is good to your point, like this oversight board, to really focus in on what is real, what is not, and to have some accountability within it.
Yep, totally. We trusted those apps, so it is definitely their responsibility to make sure that we didn't sign up for those deepfake ad
Yeah.
generating companies, right? I mean, we signed up for these apps, and they have certain responsibility towards their audience.
Yeah. One last comment, and like I said, we could probably spend the whole episode on this alone. I used to think that, all right, things are not fake, so I would go with I'm going to assume it's real unless I hear otherwise. my stance is flipped 180 on that. I assume things are fake until I could verify and validate from a credible source. And yeah, I hate to say it that way, but in today's world, as we stand right now, that's the way I look at things. It's fake
Well,
unless proven otherwise.
I would agree, Jamie. Well said. In the current age, I think this paranoia can just protect us. Essentially, online content, you have to take it with a pinch of salt.
Yep.
And yeah. Anyway, some rapid fire news. We will not go too much into detail, but just to let everybody know, Microsoft gave the LinkedIn chief, Ryan Roslansky, an added role running Office and some of the business applications and productivity, which means that, generally within the Microsoft world, LinkedIn has been kind of insulated and has its own world running, directly reporting into Satya. But now Ryan Roslansky will also have a reporting into Rajesh Jha. Rajesh Jha is actually the head of the experience and devices, which runs the devices as well as the Office and other stuff as well. Now there is actually going to be also some shuffle, like Charles Lamana, who actually has a business application including Copilot Studio, will also actually move under Ryan Roslansky. Ryan Roslansky then in effect will also become responsible for Copilot 365 app. Now that's a bit surprising because it's still not clear, and I think once the reorg come out, probably in the first week of July, then we'll know more. Because how does this interplay with Mustafa Suleiman's organization and things like that? We'll find out, but that was in the news.
Yep.
And then
I was going to say, yeah, and the other quick news, this one is sort of a scenario of you can't play with my toys. That's the way I look at this one. So
Yeah.
Anthropic's co-founder and chief science officer, Jared Kaplan, said his company cut Windsurf's direct access to Anthropic's Claude models. And why is that important? If you think about it, Anthropic Claude, either Opus or Sonnet 4 are typically the de facto models right now for developing or creating code with their models. And Windsurf or any of the other tools largely had access into those Claude models as part of the tool set. But with the with the announcement of OpenAI to acquire Windsurf, there's obviously deep competition between Anthropic and OpenAI. So what Anthropic did was pull access from using its Claude models inside of Windsurf. So there's a lot of I guess maybe unhappy people that might be using Windsurf and planning to use the Anthropic models.
Makes total sense. To be honest, that's what we all expected.
Yeah.
It would be surprising though. However, now Windsurf only remains OpenAI GPT models, which means that then how is that going to be too different from what OpenAI was trying to do with Codex and things like that? So yeah, no surprising though.
So speaking of coding, this is probably a good segue, and I don't think we planned it this way, to be honest with you, but great segue nonetheless. So French startup Mistral actually launched a coding assistant this past week. So this is an AI-powered coding assistant, and it's got a flashy name. It's called Mistral Code, and what's interesting about this is, again, it's really to compete with the other tools like we just mentioned, Windsurf, with Cursor and obviously GitHub Copilot as a tool for the agent piece. So what is it? What are the features? It's really it's all about the in-house models, or something like CodeStroll as an example, to help with auto completion. That's not, quote unquote, in my opinion, groundbreaking. What is really useful here is the ability for the agentic coding task. So this is all built into Mistral Code, and the way that this is made available is it's through extensions. So yes, they Mistral Code, you can go out and actually use their coding tool, but the real power of this is to be able to use it inside of these existing IDEs for your development. So it's available right now for VS Code as well as for JetBrains. You do need to have an enterprise license or subscription to Mistral. I actually tried doing it, and I was going to do a demo inside of Visual Studio Code, but then I kind of ran into the hey, you don't have an enterprise license to be able to use it. But it's very similar, if you will, if you're in Visual Studio Code and running GitHub, the GitHub Copilot or the GitHub Copilot agent, same concept. So the bottom line with all this is I see many different companies getting into the same space. We just talked about, Anthropic and, use of their models and being able to leverage that. We've got, OpenAI purchasing Windsurf. You've got JetBrains. You've got, Microsoft getting into this as well. And by the way, I kind of see Microsoft as the original player in this space with GitHub Copilot. It kind of fell a little bit behind in the agentic coding capability, but they've caught up. But this is just yet another tool in your arsenal, the way that I look at it. This might be, again, I'll put this out there as another future episode, but to go through each of the tools side by side with the various different agents, because Microsoft has their own agent coder. Cursor has their own agent coder. Obviously, now we've got Mistral Code that could be integrated into the other tools. So it'd be interesting to see how they all compare side by side. And I've done some testing already with some of these agents. But overall, this is just another scenario where I can use these intelligent coders. So this thing has all the typical features, by the way, that you would kind of consider that a coder or agentic coder should have. And obviously has that agent coding capability, but it's also got the code completion. It's got the ability to search across your documentation. It's got the ability to actually search across your code, and the ability to create documentation based upon your existing code, because I don't think I've met a coder who really likes to document their code. So, all the typical bells and whistles that I would expect from a company that's building a code assistant, code agent. They did mention when they, announced this that, there's quite a notable set of companies like Capgemini, SNCF. They're all using Mistral Code already in production. So that's, of interest. Obviously, you want to see organizations that are actually using this. The one thing that is a little bit different here, at least when you look through this, is that organizations could actually customize the models based upon private repositories and manage that through the console, again, through the Mistral Enterprise. So you can actually fine tune the agent based or the model for the agent based on maybe your company's coding practices and or things that you want to ensure that any quote unquote developer who's using this would follow along in terms of those standardized practices and or scenarios that you've already defined inside your org.
Yeah, I think it's sounds like another good AI assistant platform. I'm just wondering, is a civil war within the engineering? Some engineers are developing these tools to make other engineers redundant. There's a civil war happening there. Anyway. All right. So next news, ChatGPT for Business gets cloud integration and the meeting tools. So like ChatGPT has been trying to get into the enterprise space more and more. And now it supports connectors for Dropbox, Box, SharePoint, OneDrive, Google Drive, which basically allows the users to actually search the information across their own data footprints, right, within the services. So, now you have those connectors, you can just simply tap into what your own documents and data looks like, and then you use on top of that. Some of the other new features that also has been added is in basically recording and transcription of meetings, generating notes, suggesting actions, things like that. Typical thing that you will also do within, let's say, Teams Copilot. But if you don't have Teams, you can actually use this tool to also actually go through the meeting recordings and transcriptions, and then you can generate all these kind of different actions on the meeting notes. They can query the information in their meeting notes, and they can also convert the action items into Canvas documents. There is also deep research connectors for HubSpot, Linear, and some of the Microsoft and Google tools in beta now, and that again help you create that deep research report on your own knowledge and data sources. There is an MCP support, which is also now available for all the pro, team, and enterprise users. And finally, they also actually want to increase the enterprise usage of ChatGPT. That's why they're trying to build all these kind of features and connectors. And I think it's very clear OpenAI's ambitions is a lot more into now enterprise world and the coding and the agentic space, because that's where bulk of the money is. So definitely moving beyond the consumer space.
Yeah, and to that last point, all of these things, speak very loudly to OpenAI's commitment in the enterprise and being able to provide the tools, the capabilities that all enterprises are looking for, and that's deep integration, connecting into the existing data, their semi-structured or unstructured set of data. So this makes total sense, and also what I kind of call like packing in all the different tools into a consistent user interface, that being ChatGPT for enterprise. It retains the stickiness, and your enterprise users will stay within that environment longer, which means that they're using the tools more, and it's got broader adoption, broader use, and ultimately that'll drive additional revenue for OpenAI. So to me, this is certainly a smart move, and I'm sure we'll see additional integrations in the future as they expand and land the things that enterprises are looking for. So with that, let's jump to another quote unquote small little launch here. So Google Gemini 2.5 Pro, that's been out for a little while, but that doesn't mean it stops. So based on some feedback and using or use testing, obviously I think everyone understands that many of these large companies, especially these foundational AI models, collect telemetry. And obviously collect feedback on the things that are being done. So one of the pieces here was, Google certainly saw an opportunity to increase the capability for your code generation within Gemini 2.5 Pro. So they just announced a updated version of the Pro model, and its focus is to increase the capabilities on its coding ability. So basically, how well is it doing on difficult coding benchmarks or difficult coding needs that relate to those benchmarks. So this is showing, even better performance in terms of things like math and science and knowledge and its reasoning capabilities that are included within that updated 2.5 model. The thing that I would say, the availability, where you're going to see this, it's going to show up in the Google tools, like whether it's AI Studio or using Vertex AI. This is where it's currently right now, and again, it's sort of like it's not GA model just yet, so you're not going to see it everywhere. But that is expected again in the next few weeks. So if you're using tools like Cursor as an example, where you've got the ability to tie into the latest Gemini model, it'll show up in those once it goes to GA.
Okay, great. Let's move away from coding a little bit, just a little bit higher, and let's talk about the overall new offering from Anthropic, which is basically for US national security. So they're essentially launching a specialized set of AI models called Claude Gov, and which is tailored specifically for US national security agencies. And these models are designed for strategic planning, operational support, and intelligence analysis. They are optimized to handle classified material, without going off on certain content safety metrics, things like that. And then they can interpret complex cybersecurity data and understand critical languages and dialects, which are, these are very common and frequently used aspects of the intelligence analysis. The deployment and access, these are already in use by the top tier national security agencies and are only accessible within the classified environment. Usually the frameworks like this Gov and federal and things like that, you actually need to be authorized to use those, requires identification and verification to be able to access those. And these are also basically gatekeep. You can't just simply go ahead and sign up and start using them. They are actually built, these models are built with direct feedback from the government clients. So the models have gone through the rigorous safety testing, similar to, the other models. There is, I think it's a byproduct of a growing government partnership. Anthropic has done certain changes to their manifesto, to their goals. They have actually been working a lot more with the federal government and the national security government agencies. They're expanding their government collaborations. For example, they actually had a previous partnership with Palantir and AWS to market its AI to defense clients. They also actually has appointed a national security expert to its long-term benefit trust, which is not like board, but it's not like they're controlling board, but it's actually a long-term benefit trust, which kind of oversees the overall company's directions and policies. The long-term benefit trust basically is a governance mechanism that Anthropic claims that it helps it promote safety over profit, and it has the power to elect some of the company's board of directors. So this new person, Richard Fontaine, who is as a trustee, will not have any financial stake in Anthropic, and he has served as a foreign policy advisor to the late Senator John McCain, and he was an adjunct professor at Georgetown teaching security studies. For more than 6 years, he actually led the Center for a New American Security, a national security think tank based in Washington, D.C. So he's now joining the long-term benefit. So I think it just tells you the direction that Anthropic is taking. There could be a lot of money within the national security agencies and the defense clients, etc. And that's what Anthropic is trying to tap into. OpenAI is also doing the similar thing. The OpenAI is pursuing the ties with U.S. Department of Defense. Meta is offering actually Llama models to defense partners. All of them actually have done the changes in the recent past to actually allow these kind of usage by the government and the defense client. Google is doing that. Google is adapting its Gemini AI for classified use, and similarly, Cohere is working with Palantir. So that seems like a new rage, new battleground for all these companies to actually get the business. Okay, let's talk about another model, 11v3. This is the latest text-to-speech model from 11 Labs. 11 Labs is actually a very respectable name, particularly when it comes to the audio, the audio, video. Particularly, they're like amazing media models, like text-to-speech and speech-to-text and those kind of models. This is a new model which is in beta. So it is actually not even beta, sorry. It's available in alpha, and it is offered at 80% discount. So you can try that out until the end of June 2025. The public API is not yet available, but it is expected soon. I think the few features which really stood out, and I really like this one, Jamie, this is audio tags. Audio tags are something like, earlier they had like basic tags, things like, well, you could say just pause, things like that. But now with the audio tags, essentially you insert a tag, let's say laughing, giggling, right, exhaling, excited, and that changes the tone of the subsequent dialogue, or it inserts that kind of expression. So this model is actually far more expressive. So that's one major aspect of this particular version. The other is,
I was going to say on that note, I did go out to their site. What's interesting is I obviously, I'm sure you do as well, but I listen to a bunch of other podcasts. And one of those podcasts uses 11 Labs to do long reads. And so I was intrigued because I know that there's not been an update on 11 Labs for quite some time in AI terms. And anyway, so I went to 11 Labs and I listened to some of their demos, and just exactly what you just said, the ability to use these tags, but things like laughter or the whisper. That was probably the coolest thing. Like you could actually have somebody who's whispering something. And if you think about like how that could be used, in dialogue, or you're creating like literally like movies, right? And you want to have real interaction between people and have that dialogue. I was just impressed when I heard it. I'm like, we talked about deep fakes before. The ability to really mimic the way that people actually talk was amazing. Anyway, sorry for cutting you off.
True. I think, and I think we'll do a very, very short, quick demo on that audio tags as well because it is impressive. There are some other features also like multi-speaker dialogue mode. Now it supports basically dynamic conversation between multiple speakers. That was on the feature earlier. It also has like more immersive soundscape, including layered effects and expressive cues. They have now support for 70 plus languages, including English, Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, Hindi, and many more. So,
And that's
how,
a big jump because I think the previous version,
yeah,
actually, it's even on the slide. They only supported 29, so
right.
they've made a huge jump in the um,
Yep.
number of languages supported.
They've taken a long time, as you said, Jamie, that coming with this new version preview. So I would say that, I think they were busy doing things. So that is good. Now, here is a quick example on the screen of this. This is from the 11 Labs website. They actually showed one script, and then you can play that and see how these tags, like you can see the tags here, for example, laughing or giggling, right? Or big laugh, etc. And then we will just quickly see how that actually works out in terms of the like how this rendering actually works. So let's take a quick listen to it.
Okay, so I finally beat level 42 of that game I said I'd quit like a month ago. And then for the final big scary mega boss, it's just like some cute little bunny rabbit. I just couldn't do it. It was so cute.
So pretty good actually expressive text there. Anyway, since we talked about this, Jamie, I think I think it's just easier to actually talk about some of the overall use cases of text to speech. And with this, actually, we are also launching our new segment of the show, which is basically AI use cases. So we'll talk about, hopefully every week or, like whatever frequency works out for us, but we will talk about the different use cases that we are seeing. I think it is important because AI, we need to be able to take that to make it work, and people want to know how it is being used, what are the possibilities, etc. So we will talk about some of those AI use cases. Here is a list, right, of all the AI use cases. In fact, most of them actually come from the 11 labs. There are of course more that is possible, but here are some of the examples. For example, using these models, you can actually create the voiceovers for video content, right? Right, easy one. TikTok or YouTube, etc. You can just probably take a video. You can actually use it to create a transcript, or you can give it some sort of a script which is already available, and you can create the voiceover. You can also narrate the audiobooks with expressive AI voices. Whatever we heard right now is pretty good. If that is what can be used to create the audiobooks, yeah, of course, that would be pretty good. You can generate podcast voices, including cloning your own host voice. Now, I know you and I, we have an amazing voice, so we don't need this. But, others may like to use that. Add character voices to video games or build immersive AI generated voices for game characters. You can also actually enhance the virtual reality experience with dynamic voice interaction. You can put these services into, let's say, for the video game development platform like Unity, Unreal Engine. You can use the AI voice as Discord voice charger or Twilio apps, or you can convert the WordPress articles into spoken audio. There's just so much you can actually do with the text to speech. You can improve the accessibility for users with visual or reading impairments. For example, you can deliver healthcare information clearly and compassionately. And then finally, you can make presentations more engaging with AI generated narration. So, tons of use cases. Text to speech is very popular, very mature for anybody to actually make use of it. We do that. We see that with a lot of customers making use of them already.
Yeah, and like you said, there's a lot of use cases. I use some of them myself. Some of the things that you have here, like the narrating podcasts and things like that. It's not for ours, but some things that I do on the weather side, looking after um, complicated white papers on weather phenomena, and then turning that into a narration. So Yeah, there's just a lot of use cases, and text to speech is core to a lot of things that companies I've seen personally doing or using.
Absolutely. So on the let's move on to the new segment, Jamie. This week we'll also launching another new segment called Prompt of the Week, and we will talk about how the different prompts are actually adding to your experience in using AI. They're enhancing the productivity or creativity, etc. And then these prompts are something that you can probably try in your own world as well if you're not already using it. So let's take an example. This one is one of my favorite because it's so useful. When you come back from a time off or vacation, you want to actually catch up. Now you already have 1,000 emails sitting. That's scary thought. Scary, really, right? I mean, you don't want to miss, but you cannot go possibly through those 1,000 emails while the new emails have already started landing in your inbox. So what do? You basically use something like of this Copilot prompt, right? And this is generally used with the Microsoft Copilot chat or the Outlook or the Teams, because that's where generally most of the enterprise users have their all emails, etc., lying there. But let's say if you have missed out all those emails and the meetings, etc., what you do is you go with the prompt like this, which reads up like this: I have been on vacation. Summarize what I have missed from the last 7 days or whatever days into the bullet points of actions where I have been mentioned. And then look through my emails in box folder, Teams chats, and meeting recaps and transcripts. Create a table that includes action item, deadline, who assigned it, and order all items in the table by the suggested priority in which they should be completed. You can also additional instructions, for example, giving high priority to emails from your customers with the email address domain of whatever XYZ and ABC. You can also say that, hey, email from my boss should be the highest priority, of course. With this, what will happen is that the Copilot chat can actually generate a table of all the actions with the links to those meetings or the emails. It will give you the actions, and then you just simply start acting on it. That way, you're doing it much faster. You probably will be done in whatever, like in couple of hours rather than couple of days to few days that it takes to catch up. And then you can be sure that you are not missing out something of priority. I find it very, very useful, Jamie. Every time I come back, I try to use this a lot. In fact, sometimes I'm just overwhelmed. There's just so much is happening in the week. At the end of the week, I just use this just to prioritize whatever I have not actioned and then take care of that.
Yeah, no, it's that's a great example of a really good prompt, and it's not just about something that I'll call, hey, this is a fun prompt. It actually is driving productivity because instead of you sifting through all those things. So, this is a great example of a really good prompt. I'm going to use it next time I go away, which is in a couple weeks. So I'll give it a try, firsthand.
Yep. And I think for our final segment this week, word of the week, where we generally talk about something and then we describe whatever it is. Jimmy, I heard this Azure model router is actually also becoming a buzzword. Have you tried this?
Yeah, actually, I have. So those that don't know, other than doing this podcast and other than working many different hours during the week, I also provide some of my time back to my HOA or the homeowners association. So I'm on the board for one of the HOAs, and given my technical background, looked at the things that they're doing or not doing, and suggested some areas where we could use automation through AI and building applications. Long way of saying I've kind of built some things to help with the HOA. And when I saw the model router come out, I'm like, this would be great to actually use and leverage within the app that I'm constructing, because again, HOAs don't have a lot of money because it's all our money. And we want to make sure that we're using dollars most efficiently. So this model router works wonders for that scenario, because, do you want to use the biggest, GPT model that's out there for all scenarios? No. You want to be able to determine, all right, well, this task I need to use this one on, or this model versus a less capable model, where I might need things that are going to generate my responses faster, based upon this task. So that's what the model router does. So I could create some logic in my application where I say, well, if it's this type of category, then go off in this path, and then use different environment variables to change my my quote unquote my call to the model through code. But that's a lot of extra code and work that I would need to do within my application. So the whole intent of this model router is to, I'm going to say, push that complexity back onto the underlying platform. So what's great for me as a developer is I have my one definition of my model, my quote unquote one endpoint, and then I call that endpoint, and then the platform determines which route should it go. Should it use the GPT-4.1, larger model, or should it use the mini model? That is something that the platform actually decides. So what's great about that? Yeah, it helps from a simplicity standpoint, because I literally have that one endpoint rather than trying to do all this stuff in my code. But since the model router determines, oh, I should go this route because it's a less complicated query or prompt that came in, that helps to cut down costs. And the evaluation that Microsoft has said on the model router is that this could cut costs up to 60%, 60, which is super important. Again, my little scenario or case that I just mentioned about the HOA, apply that to a large organization that's doing millions of calls. We're kind of small and simple for what we're doing, but you apply that to many, hundreds or thousands of prompts, that's going to be real cost savings. And as I mentioned before, it reduces the complexity of the things that you need to do. So to me, this is great. It automatically routes the things based upon the model itself to the underlying piece. So this model router is only available for the OpenAI model, so the GPT 4.1 family and also the O4 Mini. But it integrates directly with the Azure Foundry tooling, which also means it integrates with the Azure Agent Service as well as with the Model Context Protocol, which is great. So this is again something that just was released. It's in public preview, and when it got released like 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, it coincided with Microsoft Build.
Yeah, it's
So
pretty impressive and promising, Jamie. I think one of the things is that because it supports only GPT models as of now, I'm sure that they will probably expand that in the future. Right now, it only supports GPT 4.1 family and O4 Mini. The thing is that this every time the new version comes, that will support a specific set of models. So right now, the current version supports GPT 4.1 family and O4 Mini. Now, since the models have different context window size, what happens is that it will work with that minimum context. So out of all the models that it support, it will accept the context window of that smallest model or smallest context window as its input context window. So just remember, because it might have to choose that smaller model, so it cannot accept a context window which is larger than the smallest model. So there are certain adjustments that you have to make if you want to make use of this, to make sure that it is able to actually triage between those models regardless of the context window. Okay, I think with that we are done for this week. Jamie, anything else?
no, like I said, it always amazes me when we think that there's not a lot of news going on in a particular week, because this week seems slower than the previous ones. But I think the previous weeks were so jam packed with so many different announcements. But even so, we're still close to an hour. So there's always news in AI is my comment.
That is true. That is true. We learn from each other, and hopefully everybody else will also learn. Keep listening, keep watching, and share, like, and subscribe. Bye, Jamie. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.